All right, in this video, we're going to talk about changes in matter because understanding changes in matter will allow us to figure out how calories are calculated and what they're used for in science and both in health and physical wellness. So, two things we need to understand in this video is that when matter changes, there are two types of changes, one related to physical change and one related to chemical change. So let's talk about what each of those are currently. So recall that in the last units, we know that chemistry is the study of matter, and matter is anything that has mass and volume or it takes up space, right? So this definition you should already have down. And when we're looking at matter, we talked about two ways we can observe them. We can look at quantitative, meaning I'm observing in numbers, like counting how many of something I have, that's quantitative, or the length of something or the density of something. Anything using numbers is quantitative. Qualitative is describing with words, right? So anytime I'm using words to describe what's going on, like the color or the flavor or the texture, right? So, when we're using quantitative or qualitative observations to describe something, we're often describing their physical properties. So, physical properties is just a fancy way of saying that the what the object normally looks like, right? So this object hasn't changed or turned into anything new, it's still that object. So for example, if I look at a piece of wood, type of wood is always brown, right? And if I chop that piece of wood in half, it's still going to be that same color, right? Nothing really changes about it, right? So I can describe this rock as having luster or being shiny. And, there are three different colors that I notice that are prominent in this rock type, right? So things like that. Those are physical properties. They're like pretty straightforward and boring, right? So oftentimes when we're describing physical properties, we're also describing physical changes. And these are changes where the substance stays the same. So the only difference in a physical change is that the substance goes from maybe solid to liquid, like ice melting into water, right? But if I could zoom in into the tiny, tiny molecules of water, nothing about the water has changed, right? They're still the same shape of whatever substance it is, right? So ice cream melting is also a physical change, right? It's not exactly the same as looking at an ice cream before it's melted versus after it's melted, but none of the flavor of the ice cream is actually changed, right? The ice cream is still like ice cream itself. It's just melted. And if I chop something and make it smaller into smaller pieces, that's also a physical change, right? So physical change is often when objects just get chopped into pieces, or they're turning from solid liquid to gas, or they're being dissolved. So if I put sugar in water, like sugar kind of dissolves or melts in water, that would also be an example of a physical change, right? So to me, like physical properties and physical changes are the super boring ones. They're things that just are, right? So whatever they look like is what they look like. The more interesting thing that calories is related to and what we'll do for most of chemistry is look at chemical properties and chemical change. So that's another way, or the second way, to describe matter, right? The first way was physical properties and physical change. The second way is using chemical properties and chemical changes. So chemical properties are things we observe when something turns into something new. So the fancy description in chemistry is that chemical properties are properties that can only be observed when a substance is changed into a new substance. So basically, like something that wasn't there before showed up, right? So something can be flammable, it can be reactive, it can get rotten or digested. Something can change about this thing. Those are chemical properties, right? So if I mix two things together on the GIF on the left, right, maybe a whole bunch of bubbles show up. So that's a chemical property of the two liquids, right? If I mix those two liquids, gas or bubbles will form. Or if I burn these specific chemicals, they will change colors. They can change colors, right? So these are chemical properties. What can they do, or what can they change into? A chemical change itself, the formal definition is that a chemical change are properties that can only be observed when a substance is changed into a new substance. So basically, it's what you see when something is turning into something new. So, what do you see when you light lithium chloride on fire? Well, you see a red flame. It's what you actually see happening as the reaction is occurring, right? What happens when you light ethanol in a water bottle, right? You get this like weird, cool, like jet fuel flame looking thing on the right hand side of the GIF, right? And so on and so forth. So, a chemical change is just what you see happening when something is changing into something else. The chemical property is what can happen if mixed with something else, right? So those are just two ways that we can describe the changes of matter.